Hi everyone, Javagar's Nerve is taking the chess world by storm in 2025. From amazing performances in the freestyle tournament in Weisenhaus earlier in the year, to qualifying for literally the candidates just a few weeks ago. And all of this has meant that a certain someone, his fellow countryman Nodirbek Abdusattorov, has gone under the radar, having been the youngest ever world rapid champion. If I'm not wrong, it's all been Sindarov this year. And even though I don't think there's anything personal between the two, you can sort of say that it's time for Nodirbek to just steal the show. So, without further ado, let's go. So, I've picked, in my opinion, his best 3 games. The first one is against Abhimanyu Mishra, the youngest ever to become a Grandmaster, which is a huge feat in and of itself because there are so many kids playing chess so professionally nowadays. So, e4, we have a Spanish, and now we have some mainline theory, but we have bishop to c5 here. So the more logical approach is to play bishop e7, just block the e-file and get ready to castle. Bishop c5 is a very provocative move, known as the Archangelsk or the Arkhangelsk if you may, and it's just provoking white forward. a4, instigating against b5, and now c3, trying to get the pawn to d4 and gain the 2 pawns in the center. And now, take notice here, it's a very, very important position, even though it seems so normal, and d6 was played. I'm pretty sure many of you would play castles, and after d4, you have to give up the center pawn. You have to take and play bishop b6, and you're completely losing in this position, even though, you may say it's fine. No, the center is completely lost. d6 is played, so after d4, you can just drop back with the bishop. If you're going to learn a single thing in this video, that should be that keep your center strong, and do not capture, unless you have a good reason to do so. Now a5. This pawn on the surface seems to be hanging, but you cannot take it due to various tactical reasons and the pressure against e5. I'll give you a sample line. I can, sorry, not this. I will first sacrifice my rook, and then I will take on here. And the reason will be clear, because after, for example, pawn takes, I can trade queens, which seems absolutely bogus, and I take on e5. But now you will see the ideas. The knight goes to c6, wins the rook or the bishop, and knight to f7, knight takes f7 will win the other rook, so you win back materially and you're better. After a5, the bishop just goes back. They both know this. And now again, another very beautiful move, h3. Just stopping the move bishop to g4, right? Whenever you've got the 2 pawns in the center, and one of them in particular is severely under the pressure, you just cannot let such a pin like that. This is just completely vicious. Now, the bishop goes the other way. And now rook e1. If the knight were to take on e4 beforehand, you would just have rook e1 and you would win a pawn in the e-file. So the bishop goes to e3, and now takes the knight b4. So, you may say that, well, you told us that you shouldn't give up your center, but Mishra plays this, and definitely Mishra is better than you. Well, yes he is, but in this case he has a reason. The reason is c5, and striking back with the center. But now bishop to g5, this is not the best move. Now everything is still defended, but look at the times, right? Firstly, both of them were in the prep, right? They've hardly spent any time. h6. Mishra spends 9 minutes. This is definitely a sign of bad things to come. The bishop goes now bishop h4, and now c5. Black is more comfortable here, but the time. It's all about the time. The knight goes to c3, rook e8, and now rook e3. This move is crazy because, like, what is the rook doing on here? Is it trying to go to g3? Then if it's going to g3, what is the knight doing there? It's absolutely bogus. So pawn to c4, you see, 20 minutes spent, and now another 20 minutes spent. This is not looking good. If the bishop were to live another day, of course, it would be amazing on this diagonal. Takes and b4. Have a very fine position, but now knight d5. In comes the knight. And the idea of rook e3 actually becomes clear. There's pressure on the knight, and if you try to relieve it, which is the best approach, now after rook takes, I take with the pawn. That's the whole idea. That's the whole idea. And now the f-file is open for play against there, but more importantly, this bishop is never going to get out. If it wants to get out, hypothetically, it has to go somewhere like this. And even then, d4 is still strong, and the bishop's not so good. So knight d5, the pawn goes to g5, and gives up the knight. Beautiful. But of course, takes, you have to give back a piece, takes, and rook takes, so inserting the move g5, but going into the same thing whatsoever. And now if you actually want to try to defend the knight, you just cannot, because I'll play rook f1, queen f5, you'll lose your knight. So Mishra says, okay, I'll give my knight, give the extra knight back, and I will just take your pawn. Queen f2, takes. And of course I'm up a pawn, but after rook to b5, there's no way to defend this. So why did even have to start bother playing this line? The idea is very simple. g4. The rook is miserable. This bishop can no longer even go to d8 because it's going to be captured. This rook is in an equally miserable situation because it cannot go anywhere on the 5th rank. So the rook goes back to b5, and now king e4, just completely, calm, cool, calm, and collected. The pawns will go forward. But these two pawns, also you may argue that these are passers as well, but they're not going to do anything much because king h7, h4, and rook f1. It requires great maturity to realize this does not work because then I have ideas of bishop to here. I mean, you first can play here, just get the king here, and then play bishop to a5. I've got ideas of just advancing my pawns forward, and you cannot stop them because the rook is just smoking weed over there. So the pawn goes to d5, trying to bring the bishop out. And now I just play h5, and the first moment your bishop actually gets active, it's completely crazy. I just go bishop e7, trade it off. And there's a very famous saying by Mikhail Botvinnik, a former world champion, that every single rook game is a draw. No, it's not, when two pawns are just running at your king. You can take on a5, but here c3 was played, trying desperately to create counterplay b3. Just shut the door. And the key thing is that your rook cannot go to c5 because of this pawn I maintained. The rook goes back. You could have taken on a5, but Mishra says, let's just go back up. Rook c7. You can no longer put your rook behind there. Again, another beautiful thing. An amazing thing you can learn is that, well, do not let the opponent just get the rook behind their passed pawn. Rook f8, h6. I'm just getting the pawn in. And now you gotta avoid a trade, because if you take it's a draw. Because your king can should always monitor this pawn, and this king can just stop these pawns, and it will be a draw. Rook c6. Rook goes here, check, king f4. Fine, go forward. King h7. You just move in. Simple. There's no problem. The king goes here, just simple. Rook c7 and h7, king h6, and checkmate is inevitable. So now we have a game against Sam Shankland. Story is playing as black, and now we have a Scotch. This is one of the best openings if you want to play for a win as white. Takes stakes. Now we have bishop c5, just known as a classical variation. The main line is to move bishop e3, and very tense positions arise. But knight b3 is also a line known as the Potter variation, not Harry Potter, of course. Bishop to b4 check, and now c3, bishop goes back. So why did the bishop just move 3 times in the opening? Well, firstly, it's brought the knight back and also push this pawn forward, so this knight cannot go there. So you made you've sort of induced 2 weakenings from your opponent. Now f4, just inducing you to go forward and just take all the space. What is going to happen now? d6 and knight h6. Again, even I would go knight f6, right? But this is not the correct way, because you have to make sure your pieces play with purpose. You have to play for a break. d5 is not going to be the best break because they just go e5, lock everything up, and attack. But the correct break is to play with the move f5. That's what you're going to do. Now, the knight goes to f3, king h8. Always a very fine move to get away from this diagonal after you've played f5, takes, and we have g4. This is, again, very, very edgy stuff by Shankland here. And that goes back to h6. The problem is with this approach, it's very difficult to maintain your pawns. And that goes to d4 to protect the pawn, which is now queen d7. Very simple, yet very difficult. And now the pawn goes to f5. You would be a little bit worried about bishop takes a6, but that's not important at all. I play knight to d5 and e5, activating another piece and attacking g4. If you were to trade and play h3, I would now play this move h5, and you just cannot defend. I'm just going to play rook g8, and my king is far more safe than yours. So after knight e5, h3 was played immediately, and now just knight back. You sort of just bystep those forever. The bishop goes to f4, g6 now. If the pawn on f5 falls, everything does with it. So the king goes to h2, moves off the g file, bishop f6, and now the rook goes to g8. The knight is beautiful on e6, but it just helps you get the rook to where you want to put it. The queen goes to e2. Now takes 6 and rook e8. The position is reached its maximum tension. If this pawn falls, everything does with it as well. I cannot stress it enough. The final piece gets in. The queen moves to d7, to e7. Just perhaps some ideas of bishop h4. And that goes to d4, and now knight g5. We now have got the knights in, just looking at these ideas, the bishop is given weight. This is very, very dangerous now because I have these dark squares to play with. You've pushed your own pawns, right? Then I goes here, and now bishop to h4. Simple. We've moved the bishop, and we move it again. We're going to go for a third time. This pawn is just not important at all. Just imagine taking it. It's very, very dangerous because I play check, and I will go queen to h4 and defend this, right? Defend this. But after bishop to h4, there's actually a very nice defensive move. This is the best move. Queen to h5. This seems like an attack, but no, it's just more a defense than an attack because after this same thing, you cannot play the move queen h4 without trading queens and getting into an endgame. But instead, the move rook to d4 was played, trying to keep the queens and still keep an eye on the h4 square. But check, and now c5. I don't know what he missed here, but we just gotta make sure this rook goes away. d5, d4. The rook is just now shut off. Like, it's smoking something over there, right? It seems like these two guys just took a break from the fight. But I'm just gonna go there, take a rest, smoke something. But this is not gonna work for you. The queen now goes to d4, to e4, desperately trying to defend. Now the queen goes here with the idea to sacrifice the rook. Pawn takes, and now we take. Who's gonna defend this? So the rook goes to f5, but I go the other way. Simple, very, very simple. This is just so simple. The queen goes now to g2. I just go bishop f4, and you have to keep an eye on h3, right? So the queen goes to f1. Well, you have to also keep an eye on this diagonal because queen c6 is literally just checkmated too. And yeah, Shankland, of course, had almost 20 minutes when he made this mistake. I mean, when you're in such a situation, just so angry at everything, and here he just resigned. We have the third game. He's playing as white against Nicolas Theodorou, Greek grandmaster. He plays c4, the English. This is a lot less explored, and if you're actually someone who doesn't like theory, theoretical opening sandwich, this is definitely the choice for you. So then I goes to f6. We play the King's English. This is just the reverse Sicilian, something black would play, right, with the pawn of c5 and the knight on c6, but of course you're up a move. So the pawn goes to e3, bishop to b4, and now just very, very solid line with the knights like this. No damage to the pawn structure is acceptable. The pawn goes to a5, and now pawn to a3. Just says you gotta do something. I'll also show you this very, very nice variation. Pawn to a4. You can take this, but if you get greedy and you want to take this knight, this is very interesting. You get your queen trapped, knight c6, and then rook a5. The queen is gone. This is a very funny idea, which happens in many openings. Actually, in the Nimzo Indian and the Dutch, it also happens. So very funny overlap. e3, just bishop takes, and pawn to d6. So gives up. Theodorou gives up the bishop and just tries to set up the pawns on the dark square. So bishop e2, and d3, and castles and e4. So the thing is that white is sort of better here, but e4 just is not the right play to go at it, right? Because all you do is that you just open up this diagonal for me, and I'm completely fine. But the knight goes, zips around to g6, thinks it's sort of better. It's not really. b3, my bishop's gonna go the other way. Another dance, bishop to g4, inducing f3, and now going back. But the problem is e4, and I mean, you cannot play like this. f4, f5 is coming, right? The pawn goes to c6, f4, the bishop has to move again. Bishop g4, bishop e6, bishop e7. 3 moves by this bishop, and now I just play f5. Firstly, it seems counterintuitive because the knight just simply goes here. But I have another idea. I play bishop to g5 because if you want to stick to the plan of bishop e2, I mean, how are you going to just take this knight off of this square, right? So the bishop goes to the g5 square. Again, a very good thing to learn is that do not be so inflexible. Sometimes the position changes and you have to change with it. The pawn goes to b5 now. On the surface, again, it seems like it's hanging a pawn. The correct way is actually to take once and then play knight d5. But if you were to take on b5, I just simply take, and queen b6, and you lose your knight. But what I would assume that the break didn't like was rook c8 and play on the c file. But yeah, he played an even worse move, rook to d1, and now I have b4 coming. The knight goes to the a4 square, and now, I mean, it seems like you can play a takes and b takes, and you have a pawn 2 squares for promotion, but who's gonna help this guy? You gotta just lose it. The pawn goes now to c5. Gives up the pawn, but you're still better. Queen e7, but bishop takes and rook to d8. You've got this pass pawn. I mean, it does not seem like a pass pawn, but it is. And there goes to d5. very, very funny. You cannot take it. But Theodorou says h6 and he sacrificed the queen. Well, this loses, right? Because this you cannot be winning. Take stakes. And very important thing, I take on b4, and no matter how you take, if you take like this, I've got this pawn, I can already push it. But in the game, a takes b4 happened, and now a5. How are you going to stop this pawn, right? The material is just a little bit better for me, but it's really difficult to play. You have to be careful. Now the queen goes to a2, the only move. The knight goes now to d4. The bishop goes to d4. Just look at this. It's completely stopping any movement from the knights, right? But the problem with it is that it's undefended. Knight now goes to b5. So the bishop goes to b3, and now knight c3. Queen f2 says, okay, you also have got pawn weaknesses. I'm going to attack them. The knight now goes to d3. The knights swarm the position. Very difficult. The queen goes now here. The rook goes to d4, so that it's no longer undefended. And now we're going to move the knight. The knight goes to e5. Queen f4. And pawn goes to f6. You cannot move it really, because I've got ideas of queen b8 check and just throwing the pawn forward to promote. Now the pawn goes to f6. The queen goes to e3. This draws because of, again, a very bogus move, king to h7. And apparently you no longer have checks, and I will just play some sort of a repetition against you. Because, let's say you play the move h6, right? This actually just sort of makes it even worse for you, because rook d6, right? Well, let me just bring this back a line. The correct move perhaps here was to play queen c1, with maybe ideas of playing here, monitoring everything. But yeah, rook takes c4 was played, and now queen f2, and now knight to d3. This loses. If you were to play the move knight g4, you actually had an amazing position, because after the move queen d2, right, you cannot really take the, you can also take the pawn, but it's just going to be a draw because of knights, and not knight d3, again, that's the troubles of the position. Knight takes h2, and you can simply play for a repetition. But, let me just bring this back a line. Here, if you play the move rook, no, again, I'm missing something here. Yeah, rook e2. If you play the move rook e2, this is also a draw, because you have to sack the queen. You have to sack the queen. Well, what if I just don't sack my queen? Well, in that case, you lose. I play rook b2, and look at me. I'm just promoting my own pawn. This bishop is actually doesn't have a single square. It's just literally trapped right now. Knight d3 was played, but you lose. Queen here, and now I take the rook. I just take the rook, and I push, and I queen. And again, it still seems very dangerous, because this bishop is hanging, and this pawn is literally 2 squares away from promotion. But cool, calm, and collected, bishop over here, and bishop to f7. I'm threatening checkmate for you. After knight e3 checking, f2 was played, and Theodorou simply resigned, because there's no way you can avoid checkmate. You can keep checking me, but I'm just going to move the king up, and you cannot check me anymore after that. Thanks for watching this far. I hope you enjoyed this video and perhaps learned something from it. I'll see you in the next videos. Take care.